an earlier video, I explained how Express API allows you to build rich REST APIs in just a matter of seconds. Now in this video, I'm going to go to the next level and introduce REST APIs that have nested or child resources and resources that reference other resources. My name's Grant Ronald from the Oracle Mobile Platform team. So as I showed in a previous video, resources are the fundamental element in REST services, and we typically map these resources to objects in our business. So for example, department, employee, compensation package are all business objects for which we want to expose REST resources. However, in this business case, these resources do not live in isolation, but instead they actually have a relationship with each other. So for example, a department contains employees and an employee can only exist within a department. So we might think of an employee as a child resource of a department. It's dependent on its parent resource. Also, whilst each employee has a compensation package, the full list of compensation packages can live as a separate resource without being associated with an employee. So for example, HR might put together 20 different compensation packages, but a package doesn't have to be assigned to an employee. In this case, compensation package is a reference resource from employee. Now, how does any of this impact the REST APIs that we create? With the Express API and MCS, you can define these relationships and the Express API will create the appropriate URI and payload schemas. So for the department resource, Express API will give us a get department ID in order to retrieve a specific department. If we indicate that employees is a child resource of departments, then Express API will automatically create a URI allowing us to find all employees in a specific department. And if you want to find the details on a specific employee, well, since an employee only exists as a child of a department, then the URI that Express API gives us is get department based on ID, and then get the specific employee as indicated by the employee ID. Okay, so that's the theory. So how do you actually use the Express API to define that employees is a child of departments? Okay, so here we are inside MCS and we select APIs, and I've already created an API called HR Management, and we open up that API, and I've already created a resource department within the API, and you can see it's got some fields, name and location. So let's create a child resource, and we click this sign here, and this allows us to create employee as a resource which is a child of departments. And having created the resource, let's create the fields that are in that resource. So for example, name, and maybe salary as well. And that's it. So within those couple of clicks, what the Express API has done is create these various methods to allow us to do things like list employees within a department or find particular employees within a department. So quite easy to create that child resource. Okay, so that's a child relationship. What about a reference relationship? We've decided that compensation packages is a resource that should be referenced from the employee resource. The interesting thing here is that having defined this relationship between employee and compensation package, Express API has worked out what the resulting payload should be. So if we get a specific employee, the payload shows us the fields of the employee resource, and that's ID, name, and salary. But embedded in that payload are also the fields of the compensation package resource. And this is because we defined that compensation package was a reference object to employee. And if we want to post an employee resource, basically we're creating a new employee, then Express API has worked out what the payload should be. In this case, we supply the employee name and salary plus the reference to the compensation package for that employee. So you're not supplying the whole compensation package, only the key that references the compensation package you require. And as you might imagine, Express API is creating and maintaining the schema definitions so that anyone using the API knows what to expect in the request and what they can expect in a response. It's also worth remembering that since compensation package is a reference resource to employee and so can live outside the context of an employee, it has its own URIs as well. So get comp package would return a payload of all the compensation packages in the company. So let's go on to the second demo where I'll use the Express API to define that employees references the compensation package object. And again, we're back in MCS and we're going to create a new resource, which is our compensation package resource. And let's just create this from scratch. So we'll add in some fields, a name, whether someone has a car as compensation or healthcare. And let's quickly add some sample data in there as well, just to show we're creating this from scratch. And a second row for car only compensation package. Okay, so that's us created our resource. Let's save it, compensation package resource. And now go to employee, and if we look at overview, and we can select compensation package to be a reference resource. And it's as simple as that. If we now look at the methods that are created, and in fact, let's go and test that to look at the payload. Let's save. And we can actually see that the Express API has worked out the correct payload. So for finding an employee, we can see that you supply a department ID and employee ID, and it returns the employee information plus the compensation package information nested there. And for creating an employee, Oracle MCS shows you what the example payload would look like, and it's created the schema for that payload behind the scenes as well. So as you've seen, you can use the Express API to model the relationships that you have in your business onto your REST APIs. So thank you very much for watching, and keep looking out for some new episodes on this channel.